And welcome back, everybody, to Philosophy for the People. Apologies, I think I had the wrong time set for the start, but we're here now with Dr. Gaven Kerr to continue our series on Aquinas's On the Principles of Nature. And the first one was just awesome, as I knew it would be. Lots of great feedback, and we're now on Chapter 2. Before we dive in, though, Gavin, welcome back. Thanks for being here, and looking forward to this.
Thanks very much. Hope you are all keeping well. You know, we finished semester this week. Friday's my last day of work, and then I'm just taking a break. I've been advised by, somebody who's spiritually wise just to stop and do nothing for a few days over Christmas. That's going to be hard. That's going to be hard forcing myself to sit back and just rest.
It is hard, isn't it? It's really hard. It's, especially like if you get a break from other things, my tendency is always to like do more of the stuff I've been waiting or wanting to do rather than take a break overall.
Well, what I'm looking forward to is being able to read a book and not read it and have to think, right, how am I going to work this and the 20 odd projects that I've got going, but just being able to read and enjoy it. Right. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. But anyway, good times.
Yeah, good times. Well, awesome. So we are back here now. We're going to focus on Chapter 2. Before we dive into Chapter 2, Gavin, of this great work, is there anything that you want to summarize or reiterate just to like bring back into people's consciousness from Chapter 1 before we move on?
Yeah, maybe just we finished up at Chapter 1 that when Thomas was talking about generation, he pointed out that generation requires three things or three principles. One of them is being in potency. So what is generated? There has to be some sort of potency there beforehand, which is going to become whatever it is that becomes. So you have to have some sort of being and potency. You also so that's one. You also have to have some non-being in actuality. So say you've got this something and it's going to turn into something else. This first something is not that it turns into. So it is not what it is going to become. So you have non-being in actuality. And then you have to have this third principle, and it's that through which what we have here turns into what we have there, that through which it becomes what it is. So the first one, the being and potency, that's matter. The second, the non-being in act, that's privation. Okay, so the thing which is about to become something else is deprived of that which it's going to become. It's not yet it. So there's some sort of privation there at the start of the generation. And then that through which it is an act, that through which, the actuality of the generation occurs is the form. So you have these three principles of generation: matter, form, and privation. And what Chapter 2 focuses on that we're going to have a look at now is basically how matter, form, and privation relate to each other. We start with just teasing out these different principles, and then we start having a look at matter more in depth. And then after we've done that, we start to look at the agents of generation, i.e. the causes, how there can be different causes involved in generation. So it's a nice sort of unpacking of the principles that he's already outlined in Chapter 1.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, no, that's a perfect summary. So let me do this. I will now pull up, for those who are watching, here is the text that I'm going to be reading from, and this is just right over at AquinasCC.com. And we have Chapter 2, the three principles of nature. So, Gavin, want to do it like last time? Maybe I'll read the paragraph, and then you can...
Yep, perfect.
You can fill in the details for us. Okay, so here we go. First paragraph. Therefore, there are three principles of nature: matter, form, and privation. One of these, form, is that by reason of which generation takes place. The other two are found on the part of that from which there is generation. Hence, matter and privation are the same in subject, but they differ in definition, because bronze and what is shapeless are the same before the advent of the form, but for one reason it is called bronze, and for another reason it is called shapeless. Wherefore, privation is not said to be a principle essentially, but rather a principle accidentally, because it is coincident with matter. For example, we say that it is accidental that the doctor builds, because he does not do this insofar as he is a doctor, but insofar as he is a builder, which is coincident with being a doctor in the same subject. Okay, a lot packed in there already, Gavin. So help us unpack it.
Yeah. Well, it's straightforward enough, and it's actually. Do you want to just pull it back up there on the screen, and
Sure.
I could just speak? Cheers. It kind of just speaks to what that summary I just gave beforehand. So we have these three principles, okay, by which generation occurs. You've got matter, you've got form, and you've got privation. Now, two of these principles is that from which generation takes place. So in the Latin there, it's the third line there where it says ex parte eius ex quo est generatio. So it's the generation from which ex quo. Now, matter and privation are that from which generation takes place, but the form is that to which, or that through which the generation occurs. So the second line there, he says, scilicet forma est id ad quod est generatio. So, namely, form is that to which is the generation. So the generation is directed to the form. When you think about it, when something changes, when it transforms, its material and component loses the form that it has, and it takes on a new form. So its transforming is towards the new form. Now, the privation bit here, well, where does the privation bit fit in? Because, sorry.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
Yeah. No, I've been teaching all day, I've meetings all day, so this is me winding down for the evening. So where does that fit in? Okay. Well, we've talked about matter, right? So matter is that from which the generation occurs. So we talked about, the transformation of matter. In the last example, we talked about the sperm and the egg meeting each other, losing their form of sperm and egg, and taking on the matter of those taking on a new form once, fusion occurs. Okay, so the statue example, you've got the bronze of the statue. And the bronze of the statue, the matter stands in potency to receiving this new form. So what's the privation? The privation is that the matter is deprived of the form that it's going to take on. Okay, so you have this, sort of matter, but it's deprived of the new form that it's about to take on. And the privation of matter is a principle per accidens. It's an accidental principle for the change. So privation is an accidental principle because it's coincident upon matter, which is a per se principle of change. You need the matter for the change, and the privation that matter provides is just coincidence upon there being matter. Matter is never without privation. No matter what form the matter has, it's always without some other form. So matter always has a definite form, but it's always deprived of some other form. If it has the form of the statue, it doesn't have the form of a rock. If it has the form of a rock, it doesn't have the form of a column or a brick in a house or a pillar or something like that. So it's always lacking in some form, even when it has a particular form at any one individual time. And that's where the privation occurs. The matter can always take on another form of which it is deprived. Right.
And Aquinas has this nice example here of, sort of accidental or coincidental causes versus what is per se. So, if both of my parents were neurosurgeons, which they're not, we could really say that I was caused by neurosurgeons, right?
Yeah.
But that would be a matter of coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Like they didn't have to be neurosurgeons to cause me, but they did have to be biological organisms of a certain sort, right?
Exactly. So, qua neurosurgeons, they're not per se causes, they're per accidents causes. But qua, husband and wife, partners, they are per se causes of the generation. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Very helpful. Shall we continue to the next section then?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. And continuing on, Aquinas writes, but there are two kinds of accidents. The necessary, which is not separated from the thing, for example, risability in man, and the non-necessary, which can be separated, for example, white from man. Thus, although privation is an accidental principle, still it does not follow that it is not necessary for generation, because matter is never entirely without privation. For insofar as it is under one form, it has the privation of another, and conversely, just as there is the privation of fire and air, and the privation of air and fire. So, Gavin, that sort of reiterates, I think, what you already said there a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So he's just staving off, a possible objection here. It's like, okay, privation is an accidental principle of generation, but what kind of accident is it? Is it a necessary accident? So a necessary accident is one which can't be separated from the thing, which you always find, upon the thing. So risability in man, fingerprints, something like blood type, something like that. It's not essential that you have, type O negative blood type. I'm sorry, that's the only blood type I can think of. That's a goth metal band, from my childhood.
Yeah, I remember them. Yep.
So it's not essential that you have that blood type, but some sort of blood type is consequent upon, you being a material organism. So that's a necessary accident. But then there's an unnecessary accident, which can be separated from the thing, of which it is an accident. And, he gives the typical example there of color. Quantity is another separable accident.
Hair, as Gavin has lost a bit of his since the last time we've seen him, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to look less and less like a Thomist philosopher. And I don't know what I'm looking like now, but definitely not like a Thomist. So I'm trying. Maybe I'm going for the Irish Jim Madden look over here.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I like that.
So the objection then is, okay, well, look, maybe privation is an accidental, sort of principle of generation, but perhaps it could be a separate, a separable accident, in which case you can have generation without that accident. Thomas's point here is no, it's a necessary accident. So it's an accident which always follows upon matter. It's always coincident upon matter, just as, blood type, fingerprints, risability always follows upon being a human, because matter is always going to be deprived of some form, even when it has a form right here, right now. There's some other form that it doesn't have.
Yeah, excellent. So accidental, but nevertheless necessary and inseparable. So
yep.
That's a key distinction. Okay, continuing on then.
Yep.
Also, we should note that although generation is from non-existence, we do not say that negation is the principle, but that privation is the principle, because negation does not determine a subject. Non-seeing can be said even of non-beings. For example, we say that the chimera does not see, and we say the same of beings which are not apt to have sight, such as stones. But privation is said only of a determined subject, namely that in which the habit is apt to come to be. For example, blindness is said only of those things which are apt to see. Yeah, really subtle but important distinction here between negation and privation. So let's unpack that.
So generation comes from non-being, non-esse, non-existence. So if X is generated from Y, X is generated from what is not X. Now, the worry here, and this goes right back to the Parmenidean problem about change, is if you have X being generated from non-X, you have X being generated from nothing, okay, from non-being, and from non-being, nothing follows. And so what Thomas is distinguishing here is just negation simpliciter. So the denial of something to something else, such as he gives the example there, blindness or not seeing being said of, non-existing things, such as a chimera. Let's make up some sort of chimera. I mean, what blind fantasy creatures can we think of? Any one of them. So we can predicate blindness of non-existing things, and we can predicate sort of non-seeing of things which aren't even apt to have sight, such as stones. The point here is that negation doesn't signify a determination of some actually existing subject. Privation, on the other hand, does. I was a wee bit loose with my language there because I was talking about blindness. I should have been talking about non-seeing when it came to negation. Privation does determine some sort of pre-existing subject, because when we say that something is deprived of sight, i.e. when we say that it is blind, we're saying that this is a thing which normally would see, but for some reason it doesn't have its sight. There's something going on there which it doesn't have. And we wouldn't say that about a stone. We wouldn't say that a stone is deprived of sight. We would just say it's non-seeing.
We don't feel bad because a stone can't see, but we do feel bad because Pat Flynn can barely read the text without big glasses on, right?
Sure.
Because we feel that given the sort of thing that I am, and the sort of inherent powers I have according to my nature, it is really a privation, right? Something's sort of gone wrong with me that hasn't gone wrong with the stone, because it's not apt for a stone to see. It's not in accord with its nature, right?
Yeah. And that is the kind of non-being from which generation occurs, because the sort of generation that occurs from that non-being is the generation that follows from some kind of privation, which is already in a subject. So you have something being generated from something else and not ex nihilo. It would be ex nihilo if it was a negation, another negation it was being generated from, but it's not a negation it's being generated from. It's being generated from a subject which is deprived of some sort of form.
Right. Yeah. So it's still grounded in the actuality of the subject. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Got it. Cool. Oh, right. Yeah. Very good. Again, kind of subtle distinctions, but they make a big difference. So it's important that we're catching these here. That's what I always love about reading Aquinas' stuff. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out where we left here. Also, because
that's us there. Yep.
Right here. Also, because generation does not come to be from non-being, simply speaking, but from the non-being which is in some subject, and not in just any subject, but a determined subject, because fire does not come to be from just any non-fire, but from such non-fire as is apt to receive the form of fire. Therefore, we say that privation is the principle and not negation. Privation differs from the other principles because the others are principles both in existence and in becoming. In order for a statue to come to be, there must be bronze. Further, there must be the shape of the statue.
Yeah. So that last wee bit, privation. So if you just, yep. So that last wee bit, privation differs from the others because the others are principles in existence and in becoming. And then the following sentence about the statue and the bronze, that's best left until the next paragraph. So if we take it up to those last couple of sentences then, so if you just scroll up a wee bit.
Yep.
Yeah. So, generation. So if we'll just take it from generation, not coming to be from non-being, simply speaking, and we'll take it down to privation, that's, its own intelligible unit. And then those last couple of sentences we'll take with the next paragraph because they're related to that properly rather than what came before. So, generation, it doesn't come to be from non-being, simply speaking. It's not ex nihilo. It doesn't come to be from nothingness, but it comes to be from the non-being, which is in some subject, which is some sort of privation that the subject has. So we've got this chunk of marble, right? And it's deprived. It doesn't have the form of the statue of David. Now, giving that privation signifies the determinacy of the chunk of marble. It could be the statue of David, but it is not at the minute the statue of David. So that chunk of marble could take on the form of the statue of David. But take another bit of matter, water in liquid form. Water in liquid form, yes, it's deprived of the statue of David, but it's not a determined subject. That deprivation doesn't determine the subject in such a way that it could take on the form of the statue of David, at least not in its liquid form. Obviously, if it was a block of ice, it could.
Right.
So the privation has to determine the subject in such a way that the subject can take on the form that it's changing into. In other words, the matter which is deprived of the form has to be already disposed in such a way that it can take on that form. So the form of the statue of David has to be in something which is sculptable, whereas liquid and gas isn't sculptable. The form of, say, an axe or a saw or a drill can be, sort of, the only sort of matter it can inform would be like steel or iron or something like that. I mean, it wouldn't do you very good to have a drill made out of wood or something like that. You need to, the form needs to be proportionate, or the matter needs to be proportionate to the form which informs it. And so the privation determines the matter in such a way that that matter stands open to receiving that form. That's the point that he's making there.
Good. Yeah. And the disposition of matter, important point.
Yeah.
All right. So want to, yeah, go ahead.
So if you take it from privation differs and then just read right through to the next paragraph.
I will pick it up from there. Privation differs from the other principles because the others are principles both in existence and in becoming. In order for a statue to come to be, there must be bronze. Further, there must be the shape of the statue. Again, when the statue already exists, it is necessary that these two exist. But privation is a principle in becoming and not in existing, because until the statue comes to be, it must not be a statue. For if it were, it would not come to be, because whatever comes to be is not except in successive things, for example, in time and motion. But from the fact that the statue already exists, the privation of statue is not there, because affirmation and negation are not found together, and neither are privation and habit. Likewise, privation is an accidental principle, as was explained above, but the other two are essential principles.
Yeah. So in generation, we have two principles which are per se, or are essential principles, and that's matter and form. And we have one principle which is an accidental principle. It's a necessary accident, but it's an accidental principle of generation, and that is privation. Because privation is an accidental principle, it's not a principle that stands on its own. Matter and form are principles which stand on their own because they're per se principles. So you've got an actual chunk of matter and you've got an actual form, okay, that chunk of matter kind of, is informed by. Okay, so they are principles of existing. In order to exist, the thing has to have both matter and form, and of becoming. In order for becoming to occur, the matter has to have sufficient potentiality to receive some sort of new form. So they're principles of existing and of becoming, of being and of becoming. Privation, on the other hand, is not a principle of being. It is only a principle of becoming. Privation is what allows for one thing to turn into another, because before it turns into the other thing, it is deprived of the form of the other thing it's going to turn into. And that's always coincident upon matter. But it's not a principle of the being of the thing. Privation doesn't make the thing be. Matter and form do make the thing be. Privation only allows the thing to become a different thing.
Excellent. Very, very good. Okie doke. Let's scroll down. We are making good progress here. Excellent explanations, by the way, Gavin. Really, really good and helpful.
It's as if I've taught this before.
Yeah, you've been around this text before. All right, continuing on then. Therefore, from what was said, it is plain that matter differs from form and privation by definition. Matter is that in which the form and privation are understood, just as in bronze, the shape and the shapeless is understood. Still, matter sometimes designates privation and sometimes does not designate privation. For example, when bronze becomes the matter of the statue, it does not imply a privation, because when I speak of bronze in this way, I do not mean what is undisposed or shapeless. Flour, on the other hand, since it is the matter with respect to bread, implies in itself the privation of the form of bread, because when I say flour, the lack of disposition or the inordination opposed to the form of bread is signified. Also, because in generation the matter or the subject remains, but the privation does not, nor does the composite of matter and privation. Therefore, the matter which does not imply privation is permanent, but that which implies privation is transient.
So, really what he's doing there, he's distinguishing different features of matter and form and how they're related to each other. So all we have, don't think of matter and form and privation as these three things that we're trying to kind of relate to each other. All we have is one thing, which is the substance. And then when it transforms into something else, we have a different substance. But this substance has these metaphysical principles behind it. Two of them are per se, which is matter and form. The substance is composed of matter and form. And the third of which is privation. And privation is attendant upon or accidental or coincident with matter. Yeah. All right. So matter then differs secundum rationem. Okay. That just means by definition or conceptually speaking, matter differs from form and privation. Matter is that in which form resides. So the form resides in the matter, and privation is understood to be in the matter and coincident with the matter. So the form or the shape of the statue resides in the matter of the statue, the bronze or the marble.
Right.
And the shapelessness of the statue, say before it is carved into the matter, is understood to be in the matter as well. So this matter is without, the shape of the statue of David or, whatever statue it is. But sometimes we can talk about matter as being with privation, and sometimes we can talk about matter as being without privation. And he's setting us up here to transition to talking about prime matter. So when we talk about matter, so he gives the example there of bronze. When the bronze becomes the matter of the statue, it doesn't signify a privation because it's the matter with this particular form. We're saying it's the matter of the statue of David. So we're not thinking of it now as being deprived of some form because we're thinking about it as having the form of the statue. Okay, so fair enough. So when we talk about the matter of the statue, we're not designating it as having some privation. But you take flour, on the other hand, he gives the example of flour whenever you make bread. When you think of flour, you're thinking of it as without some sort of form that it could have, i.e. it could be the matter of the bread that you make. So when you think of flour, you are thinking of some kind of matter as being deprived of a form and, standing in need, of some form that's going to have, i.e. the form of bread, because it has the lack of disposition, or it's not ordained to the form of bread in itself. You have to do stuff with flour so that, bread can come out of it. Now, as he says there, in generation, the matter or the subject remains, but the privation does not remain. So that just means that whenever generation occurs, let's say X becomes Y, X is deprived of the form of Y. When it turns into Y, you still have the matter of X, but it is no longer deprived of the form of Y.
Right.
It is no longer suffering under the deprivation of the form of Y. It now has the actuality of the form of Y. The matter which doesn't apply privation, i.e. the matter which subsists, through the change and is in the thing being informed, that's permanent. But that matter which implies privation, that's transient. Okay, so that's matter without, that's matter is deprived of the form. Once it receives the form, that matter which no longer had the form is no longer there. You now have the matter with the form.
Excellent. Yeah, very helpful. The little illustrations are helpful as well. And the bread and the statue, that always holds up well.
Okay.
All right. So okay, guys, we are rocking and rolling. Just a few more paragraphs here. So moving on, we should notice too that some matter has a composition of form, bronze, for example. For although it is the matter with respect to the statue, the bronze itself is composed of matter and form. Therefore, bronze is not called prime matter, even though it has matter. However, that matter which is understood without any form and privation, but rather is subject to form and privation, is called prime matter by reason of the fact that there is no other matter before it. This is also called heil. Also, because all knowledge in every definition comes by way of the form, prime matter cannot be defined or known in itself, but only through the composite. Consequently, it might be said that this is prime matter, which is related to all forms of privations, as bronze is to the statue and the shapeless. And this is called, first, simply speaking. A thing can also be called prime matter with respect to some genus, as water with respect to aqueous solutions. This, however, is not first simply speaking because it is composed of matter and form. Hence, it has a prior matter. Okay, prime matter, the notorious difficulty.
So really,
yeah.
Prime matter here, basically, we use the example of the bronze and the statue, and we say, look, the bronze is the matter of the statue. Because it doesn't have the form of the statue, and then once it's informed, it now has the form of the statue. So the statue, is deprived of, the bronze is deprived of the form of the statue, receives the form, no longer deprived of the form of the statue. We've got a new, composite thing here. Okay, but then we think about bronze, or we think about marble. Well, that has a form to it. So marble is a kind of stone, different from granite, different from what other kind of stones that you have, sandstone, limestone, or whatever. So it too is a composite of matter and form. So whilst it stands as matter to the statue, the matter itself has its own form. So it has its own matter. There is some base level matter which the matter of the statue has. Let's say the elements, but then the elements themselves are formed. They have a form to them. So we say that there is some base matter which all things have, which doesn't have a matter or a privation of its own, but stands as the matter to everything else. And this is prime matter. This is what underlies everything else. Prime matter doesn't have any matter of its own, but stands as matter for all else.
Right, and we've
That's
said
what
that
our
this is it's necessary to posit this principle, not because it's something we see independently. We're saying no, this never stands independently, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's necessary to posit this principle because there can't be change unless something stays the same, right?
Yeah,
There can't-
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's how we avoid saying that in any generation there's creatio ex nihilo, because if prime matter remains throughout the generation, then there's continuity in being there throughout the generation. There's always some continuity in the transition from one thing to the other. It's just that the prime matter is coming to be informed by something else. But we can never know the prime matter except that it is the prime matter of the composite thing. Prime matter is real, but it doesn't exist in itself. It always exists in the composite as formed.
Yeah. And I know last time we speculated, as some Thomists do, and I know you're sympathetic to this line of thought as a tentative proposal, and Oderberg kind of flirts with it in Real Essentialism, that the way certain contemporary scientists think of energy might be it might itself be a sort of parallel, or maybe even itself a candidate for prime matter, in the sense that we always have something that we never find like completely like standing on its own, but always in a configuration. But it's configured in different ways, right? So that principle, which always is configured or configurable, though we never find it without a configuration. That's what we're talking about, right? With respect to prime matter.
That is a very good way of thinking about it. Now, but I want to be clear in being sympathetic to that. Even if you go down that line, you're not pinning your hopes on prime matter on energy. Not having some underlying, super energy from which it is derived. The point is just that highlights the kind of thinking which is going on here. But, should some, new scientific discoveries be made about energy? Well, fair enough. That doesn't affect what we're saying here.
Right. And I think that's why Oderberg's tentative. He's like, hey, maybe this is the case, but, it would be, we shouldn't put all of our eggs in this basket because it might not be the case. Right.
Yeah. It's just a nice illustration that takes advantage of, contemporary views in physics.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Very, very good. All right. We will continue on here. And here we go. Note also that prime matter and likewise form is neither generated nor corrupted, because every generation goes from something to something. But that from which the generation takes place is matter, and that in which generation terminates is form. Therefore, if matter and form were generated, there would be a matter of matter and a form of form, and so on forever. Hence, properly speaking, there is only generation of the composite.
Yeah,
that's an interesting point.
So what's generated is the composite thing. The principles of the composite thing themselves, the prime matter and the form, are not generated, because the prime matter is that from which the generation occurs, and the form is that to which the generation occurs. If the matter was generated, then there would be a that from which matter is generated, and so matter wouldn't be the that from which the matter is generated. And if the form were generated, there would be that to which the form is generated, in which case form wouldn't be that to which generation occurs. So it's only the composite of matter and form that's generated, not the matter and form themselves.
Right. Excellent. Okay. 2 more paragraphs. You're doing good, class. And of course, Gavin, you're doing great too. This is really helpful. All right. Aquinas continues. Again, notice that prime matter is said to be numerically one in all things, but to be numerically one can be said in 2 ways, such as that which has a determined numerically one form, like Socrates. Prime matter is not said to be numerically one in this way, since it does not have in itself a form. Also, something is said to be numerically one because it is without the dispositions which would cause it to differ numerically. Prime matter is said to be numerically one in this way because it is understood without all the dispositions which would cause it to differ numerically.
Yeah. So something is numerically one. Take an individual like Socrates. Socrates is numerically one because he's divided off from Plato, Aristotle, and Aquinas. And why is he divided off? Because he exists, or he did exist under determined dimensions and not within the same dimensions that, Plato, Aristotle, and Aquinas did. So Socrates is existing as numerically one. Okay. He's existing with those dispositions that kind of cause him to exist, as that numerically one thing. But then something else is numerically one because it's without the dispositions, as Thomas says here, that would cause it to differ numerically. Okay, so it's without the form which gives dimensionality to the matter, which distinguishes, that one thing from the other.
Right.
Because prime matter is without that dimensionality that distinguishes one thing from the other. Prime matter, just qua prime, is just one because it's not divided up.
Right, it's just prime matter, right?
Yeah, doesn't have dimensionality, like energy.
Right.
We don't have forms of energy, but if you were to just take it in itself, it would be numerically one.
Yeah, very cool. Good connection there. All right, final paragraph. Here we go. Notice, likewise, that although prime matter does not have in its definition any form or privation, for example, neither shaped nor shapeless in the definition of bronze, nevertheless, matter is never completely without form and privation because it is sometimes under one form and sometimes under another. Moreover, it can never exist by itself, for since it does not have any form in its definition, it cannot exist in act, since existence in act is only from the form. Rather, it exists only in potency. Therefore, whatever exists in act cannot be called prime matter. So that kind of reiterates a point we already made, Gavin, but maybe you want to expand on it.
Yeah, the idea here is that the matter that we see existing is the matter, the designated matter, which is always under some form. Okay. Prime matter in itself never exists in itself, because if it did, it would be pure potency. And as pure potency, it would have no actuality to it. So it would have no actual existence. So prime matter then just can't exist in itself. It always has to exist as the matter of something. It always has to exist as with some form.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, chapter 3 is coming up next, which will be on the 4 causes. And Gavin, any final thoughts on chapter 2? And then maybe we'll take a comment or question or two from the gentle listener.
No, just that chapter 2 is the natural sort of capitulation or conclusion of chapter 1. So chapter 1 outlined, generation and corruption, and how we have these 3 principles of generation: being in potency, being some sort of privation, and some sort of actuality towards which the potency is ordered. Now we've just had a look at these: matter, privation, and form, and how they relate to each other. 2 of them are per se principles of generation, the matter and the form, and one of them is a per accidens principle, the privation. And then Thomas has just looked at matter, and how we can think about matter and matter without any form, which is prime matter, which we finished up with there. So nice, straightforward, just kind of resume of the whole thing. That it's chapter 3 where we start getting onto the new stuff when we start looking at the 4 causes. Yeah,
beautiful, excellent, and really helpful again exposition there, Gavin. I thank you for that. All right, let's take a comment or question or two. Colin says he's got his ecclesial Latin dictionary out so he can translate along the way. All right, very good.
Oh, very good, Colin. Yeah, that's congratulations.
Here's a request, Gavin, I think we might be able to fulfill at some point. JC Beats wants to know, would we be willing to do an episode discussing Kant and epistemology with Gavin? I think he did his dissertation on that topic.
You would be right. I did do my dissertation on Aquinas and Kant. I would love to do that. I've just finished up teaching my epistemology course this year, and it's just been the last few weeks have just been all about the Kant. Actually, the last 4 or 5 weeks, we did Kant, then we went on to Lonergan, and we went on to McDowell and the Pittsburgh school. So I'm fully I'm in the zone right now at this minute.
But we should do it soon then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to, do something on Kant, especially realist readings of Kant, reading Kant as a realist, as sort of leading to some kind of realism. I think Kant's thought is immensely pregnant, with insights which can help contemporary realists avoid the rationalist and empiricist sort of tendencies. Right. In modern philosophy. That's what Kant was trying to avoid, these rationalist and empiricist, sort of views that reality is represented to us in our minds in some sort of way, either through, Descartes or through Berkeley. So Kant is really trying to get beyond that. He's not a field Berkeleyan. He's not, trying to say that being is to be perceived and let's just throw in some noumenal objects there, which, we don't know nothing about. That's not what he's doing. He describes himself as an empirical realist and a transcendental idealist. Mm-hmm. That's what he is. So empirically, things are real, but the conditions for our knowing those things is that we have to have some sort of conceptual apparatus in us as rational individuals, which is brought into operation, which allows us to see those things which are empirically real. That's the thrust of the first critique. And when people didn't understand that about Kant, Kant wrote the Prolegomena to future metaphysics to try and get them to understand it, and they still didn't understand it. And then Norman Kemp Smith comes along, and he, gives us the Kant, which is the field Berkeley, and then Henry Allison has to come along, and Paul Geyer and Kenneth Westphal to help fix things up a wee bit. So yeah, I'm totally, you can tell I'm just totally in the zone with that.
Well, I love it. Well, we'll coordinate and try and do this soon. Of course, we've done the episode on sort of mind world connection before with Jim. So if JC hasn't heard that, maybe he want to start with there, and we'll try and get something on the books here to do that soon, because I would love to chat about that as well. Do you think, so obviously we've both been very influenced by Lonergan. Do you think Lonergan understands Kant? Because my impression is maybe you would think that somebody like Norris Clark probably doesn't understand Kant.
I think Lonergan definitely did understand Kant, because think about Lonergan. What does Lonergan say? We have this cognitional process. Knowing is not taking a good hard look at what is there to be seen. Knowing is this process, the culmination of which is the product, which is knowledge. How is that process brought into operation? Through our engagement with empirical reality. Empirical reality then has to be such that it is capable of bringing into operation a cognitional process. So there must be something cognitively recognizable in empirical reality itself, which can bring into operation our cognitive capacities. That's what Kant held. That's what Kant thought, that these, the a priori in us is only brought into operation because there is something homogeneous with the a priori in the world. Now, if we were Aristotelians, what we would be saying is that the agent intellect is sparked up into operation because of the form of things. The form of thing is homogeneous with the agent intellect because there's this intelligible species that the agent intellect can grasp, and in grasping it informs the possible intellect. It's the same thing being said in Kant and the post-Kantian philosophers. There is something about reality which is such that it is capable of awakening our conscious cognitive awareness. Being is what the intellect first conceives. So being must be such that it can be intellectually conceivable. Kant is saying the same thing. It's just that Kant is so focused on the a priori, and there's been this tradition of interpreting Kant that the a priori is kind of like a Berkeleyan sort of imposition, a creation of reality, that we miss just the tremendous fecundity of Kant's thought.
I mean, that was, in both my undergrad and to some extent my master's as well, that was how Kant was presented to me.
And it still is.
So we'll have to do some cleanup duty here, Gavin.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, we get defensible readings of Kant in that way. So Peter Strawson's reading of Kant in the Bounds of Sense was that kind of Kant, and it's a very entrenched reading of Kant. So you do get important thinkers reading him that way. But there's a very strong, I would say Hegelian interpretation of Kant that would stress the more realist sort of view. And so that's where we're going down to Henry Allison, the Paul Geyer, the Kenneth Westphal, the Pittsburgh school route. And just that we're mentioning Kant and Hegel there, I've got Hegel's Phenomenology on my desk and Koyev's commentary on the Phenomenology des Geistes of Hegel. So I'm working my way through that at the minute.
We're gonna have to do a roundtable with Jim on that then.
We do. Yeah, we need to get Jim in on that.
JC, we're going to make good on your request, my friend, and give you probably more than your money's worth here at Philosophy for the People. So thank you for getting Gavin excited. Got me excited too. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, let's take one or two more comments here. Callum says, heads up, the Gavin's De Ente book is currently a third the price on Amazon, at least in the UK. Go buy it. Where is it? Do I have that lying around here?
What's a third of the price of my book? What? 70,
I don't know.
80,
I feel
$90?
like I paid 70 or 80 twice for your book, because one for myself, and we did a giveaway once. I bought another copy. So here it is. Beautiful. Excellent, necessary read. Yeah. And Callum says, it looks like I'll own every book Gavin has ever written. Determined.
Yeah. £18, he's saying.
Oh, that's totally worth it. Go get it.
Wow. Go put that in the Thomas discussion group on Facebook.
Yeah, seriously, go help Gavin out, because this is not like Gavin's going to retire, right? We know how it works for authors here. They often get the short end of the royalty stick, but it's good work, and if we can get it in more people's hands, it deserves to be out there. And that reminds me, Gavin, is I think we are committed to doing, after we finish on the principles of nature, we'll do De Ante after this, right?
Yeah. I think the De Ante has to follow the principles of nature, because the principles of nature, we're getting Thomas's philosophy of nature, and then the De Ante, we're getting his metaphysics. And the philosophy of nature is the metaphysics put into practice with empirical reality. So what you're seeing here, you're seeing this sort of the horizon, and beyond the horizon is the metaphysics. So this is a nice pedagogical lean into the De Ante. Now, whenever, sort of, some people have been asking me, and I've been telling them, read the principles of nature first, then read the De Ante. I did it the other way around, and it just ruined things for me. I read the De Ante first, and then after a few years read the principles of nature. But my reading is wild and out of control. There's no logic to my reading, whatever. So I mean, I'm sitting here with Hegel, Aquinas, and Charles Taylor on my desk.
Love it.
Avicenna somewhere else over here.
What's the what Charles Taylor book? Realism Regained.
I've got Sources of the Self.
Oh, okay.
I've got two Charles Taylor. I've got Sources of the Self, and I've got his book on Hegel.
Okay. Very good.
And just, if you're interested, I've got a book on theosis as well that I'm reading, called To Be Children of God.
Oh,
the Catholic
very cool.
Theology of Human Deification.
I would be very interested in that. I'll have to snag that one. Gavin, anything you want to announce before we wrap this one up? Anything that you're working on or stuff coming up?
Let's see. So I'm getting this book finished on the 5 ways that you and I are writing together. Just rounding out the 4th way. I made a good start on the 4th way, and then was hit with a ton of deadlines this week. But getting that finished, and then I'll get on to the 5th way, should be a bit of a breeze. So that'll be the main sort of text of it, all the 5 ways, and then we're just into the other bits and pieces. So that's coming along. I just got an article off with the deadline for it was sent off, and I'm just finished up teaching, so I can get back to the main sort of monograph that I'm writing on classical theism. But I've been so pumped about the Kant and the epistemology lately. I'm really, I want to get the classical theism book out of the way so I can get on to really my thesis, the topic of my PhD dissertation. I want to maybe sort of bring that up to date and get that published. So yeah, that's that. Other than that, as I said at the start, I've been advised, by somebody who is spiritually wise to take a rest over Christmas. So this Friday I finish. I'm going to go to Kung Fu on Friday night. I've got a 5K run sort of for charity that I'm doing on Saturday. And I'm just, taking next week off. I'm going to enjoy Christmas, maybe go into the new year, read what I want to read, not what I have to read. Yeah. And then pick things back up in the new year.
That's beautiful. God bless you, Gavin. And thank you again for helping us as being our resident expert here on all things Thomism. We really appreciate it. This is I hope this will serve as a very valuable resource for many people down the line. So thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.